evolve and change. So there's no single answer for managing virtual teams, but even just accepting and understanding this, that again, the work environment is different. And especially every individual situation is different. People are experiencing virtual work from home in different ways. And so it's really important, I believe, as managers and leaders to better understand what their experience is. What I'd like to use for this is actually an article I ran across a number of months ago, and it's from the strategyplusbusiness.com, and it's by David Clark. And it's a great article. There's the link there to use that. But these 4 categories I felt like were some good structure for me. And really, so as I think about managing virtual teams, the first thing I really needed to think about is how am I going to manage my function? And these 4 categories really help me think through what I need to provide some structure and some structure and some focus for my team members. There's a lot of really good information out there on managing virtual teams. You can Google and get a lot of good stuff. There have been organizations and groups within organizations that have been managing virtual teams for literally decades. There's one significant difference I would say for us right now. Typically, those kind of purpose-built virtual teams have staff members who applied for and took the job because it was virtual. And that's probably the most significant difference for us is in many cases, our teams that are now working virtually are not doing that by choice, right? This is what happened. So that changes the dynamic fairly significantly. Also managing a virtual team in and amongst all the other events, school and the pandemic, those things all add to kind of the challenges. So while there's good information out there, we really want to talk about our own personal experiences around this because there are some significant differences. The first one the author talked about here was doubling down on the digital transformation. And, that's extremely important at this point. Early on, we were just trying to kind of get by. We would use whatever tools were available. Again, continually thinking that this is going to be, we'll be able to go back to work in the next few weeks or months, and it's just kind of extended. And I think it's really important, certainly at this point, to really invest or utilize tools that makes everybody's job a little bit better. And even something as simple as how you interact, whether you're going to use Zoom or you're going to use Teams or some other tool, it's really good for the team to be able to pick a tool that you're going to use to interact with them and make sure they have the training, the coaching, whatever they need to be able to do that. Again, if you have team members who are struggling with the technology portion of it, that's just another layer on top of an already challenging situation. There any given day, when I'm interacting with maybe external consultants or the things that are going on, I might use Teams, Zoom, Blue Jeans, the list goes on. And each time you do that, you start to feel like a rookie all over again. You don't know which button to press or what to do. So I think when it comes to, tools to engage your staff members, I think it's really important to pick one, whichever that one happens to be, and make sure people are comfortable using it. And again, depending on, what your work is, there may be tools within that occupation that need some attention as well. We, as part of the learning and development function, we're delivering all our development opportunities virtually now. So I really need to significantly look at the tools to make that more effective. So, kind of step one on the digital transformation, ensure your team has a good set of tools to engage. And then part 2 of that really is, what are the other things your function needs to survive too? Amy, anything you want to add to that?
I think from the perspective from the lab, from the managers and the staff, it's actually been a great opportunity because although we were well positioned in a lot of areas to work remotely, we weren't necessarily positioned for 5,000 people to go remote and also to bring on our new staff and all of the challenges that came with that. So when we're talking about the digital transformation, it really presented an opportunity for us to look at maybe positions or functions that were not traditionally remote. How could we transform the way we worked in order to keep the progress of the lab moving forward, keep our employees on staff and employed? And so I think it brought about a lot of different solutions for staff to become remote workers, at least in the interim for some people.
Yeah, that that happened in a number of areas too, and even for my own team. I mean, we are digging into areas that with the use of technology, and for example, we've always had staff in other areas. We have them in College Park and Sequim, Seattle, some other areas, and so actually us delivering content in a virtual format has actually been a really good thing that we need to think about for the future to stay with us. And in fact, we've got a couple of comments from our offsite staff who wonder why it took us so long to figure out how to do this virtually. So I think it's important, again, maximize the tools that you have. And that actually kind of leads into that next one, I know what to hold. And while we didn't do very much virtual development or delivery in the past, it has, again, shown to have some future possibilities there. And I really have to evaluate within my own function of the things that that we've maybe put on hold until we wait for that other day when everybody goes back to work and everything goes back to normal. I'm really kind of challenging myself to say, okay, what are those things? If I can't do them right now, do I really need to hold on to them? I think that's a question. If they're really important, do I need to find a way to do it differently? And should just truly understand, I don't want to, you think about development opportunities within the lab. People more than ever need engagement right now. They need connection. They need that sense of kind of a nurturing relationship there. And actually development opportunities is one of those things that help provide that. So again, I think just a self-evaluation of if you're holding anything back, kind of challenge yourself with that thinking in terms of, can I do it differently? Or, if I'm holding on to it, did I really need to do that? So something else to think about. Amy?
Mm-hmm. Nope, completely agree. I think it's put us in a space where oftentimes we will look at the future and what those opportunities will bring at the lab, say, just in general. And this gave us another opportunity to look at, oh, well, we can't have everybody go remote, or we can't have managers who can manage teams from Florida or from, somewhere around the country. And now this has put us in a space of, well, why did we say that we couldn't do that? Because now we can do that. So I think that's what's been great too around the lab, is just to see leaders at the highest levels and throughout the organization and staff really come together to find new solutions on how we operate and how we connect with each other.
Yeah. And so another big part of this is, and again, this was a big one for me, is this managing shorter increments. And I say for me personally, it's probably managing in quarters. Well, I think it's still extremely important to have that long-term vision and strategy and where you're going. People do, they need a sense of kind of purpose and what's going on. And I think that's much easier to do in shorter increments. I find my staff have an easier time engaging if we can just get through the next quarter. What's the next few highlights that we're going to do? If we go beyond that, it kind of creates uncertainty. And in general, people really crave that certainty. And when they don't have it, it creates anxiety. So this one was really important for me. I really, again, important to have the vision and strategy and kind of long-term plan, but for managing at that local level, I think that's really important to give people, achievable goals in areas that you can see the end of, right? Which, again, for each person, that might be different. That might be a week or a month or 2 months or 3 months. For me, what's working is about a quarter. I let everybody know what they're going to be doing in the next quarter. And then we kind of iterate on the following quarter. Amy?
Yep. And I feel like some best practices that we adopted throughout the lab with this transition through the pandemic has been as we talk about managing in shorter increments. We've also changed the way that our meetings look in some circumstances where we've had leaders connect. So for instance, our chief HR officer, we have a 15-minute call with her. Anybody and everybody in HR can get on that call on a Friday, and she goes over the highlights of kind of what happened for the week, strategy highlights, and what we're looking at for the next week or two down the road. And we also have fun. We laugh, we share pictures, and that's been a great opportunity for our team to connect. And we've transitioned a little bit too with some of our meetings and our other groups throughout the lab, as far as maybe not having an agenda right off the bat, where we just kind of talk about how everybody's doing, and then we'll hit some of those highlights. So, Dale and I have had conversations about just, how do you look at managing in shorter increments, not just from the standpoint of goals and deliverables, but from the standpoint of connecting with your team. So we found creative ways to do that, and people are really enjoying it. And a 5 or 10-minute conversation with a team can go a long way every week.
Yeah, and I think that's a balance, and for each manager and each group, I think you have to find what that balance is. We do end up meeting a lot more. I have a staff meeting on every Monday, and there's a lot of information to cover, right? And people crave that information, so I definitely want to provide that. On the other hand, you have, helping people manage those meetings and how many they have during the course of the week is I think is extremely important as well. I think the first term I heard from one of my teammates, he was teaching all day in Zoom, and at the end of the day, he said, "I have a Zoom headache." So that was a brand new feature, and since then I've heard of Zoom gloom and some other things too. It is exhausting to stay in a virtual meeting for a longer period of time. You have a lot of senses working really hard to try to make sense of everything. So again, finding that balance, right? You need to meet more. And I think Amy makes a great point that some of those meetings just need to be non-agenda driven check-ins. It is really, asking questions like what's on your mind or how are you doing versus, scope, schedule, and budget type questions, right? About deliverables. So more connections in a different way, but also managing how much time people are actually putting into virtual meetings during the course of a week. Again, for me, managing shorter increments, about a quarter works, but I think that's different for different people. It's helped my team. All right, and finally on this particular slide, so planning for operational resilience, this has some broad implications in a lot of different areas. But for me, it took a lot of work to shift from, working on site to moving virtual. It was a big disruption and took a lot of effort, for my team personally, converting courses from classroom based to virtual. It was a lot of work. And as I think about planning, at least in the near term, I don't want to create another situation where I've got people comfortable doing something completely different and then things go back or things shift in some way that I create another huge disruption as well. So I want to make sure as we're developing and delivering and executing in the months to come that we're not, painting ourselves in another corner, that we need to be in a situation where if, the environment changes 3 months from now in some significant way, that we're going to be just a little bit more fleet of foot, right? We're going to be a little bit more agile, and I don't want to create the same situation where it creates so much disruption. Amy?
Yeah, and part of the planning for that, not only your strategy and some of the points that Dale spoke to, but also your people strategy and what does that look like from a resilience standpoint. You know, right now we've had a lot of focus on staff where, you know, children are back in school and people are trying to adjust to schedules and taking breaks during the day to educate children, but also we have folks who are taking care of elderly parents, and we have people that are dealing with a lot of other life circumstances or family members that maybe have financial hardships and different things like that. So as you think about whatever your resiliency strategy is going to be, think about how the impact on the people, your people resources, that's going to continue to evolve and just look differently in the future. We definitely need to have a high level of empathy and understanding of what our folks are going through, and how can we, like Dale said, how can we be agile in our approach?
Yeah, and we'll talk just, you know, spend some more time on the people aspect of it, because that is the significant element of this. But again, just thinking about this has really helped me personally. It's, you know, thinking about first, how am I going to manage? How am I going to manage my function and the work that we do, and bring some clarity to it. And that really helps as that kind of first step into managing virtual teams. And then here I want to, you know, just dig into the people side of this just a little more. So, you know, here's some key responsibilities I think as managers we need to think about. And the first one is certainly building trust. And again, that looks a little bit different in this environment. And, you know, hopefully for most of us, you know, that trust came with us, right? That trust was established before we went in virtual environment. So that's a little bit easier. Now, on the other hand, we've been hiring a lot of people who actually came in this environment, right? So that in some cases they haven't even been to the physical lab space yet, to the campus. So how do we build trust with those folks that just came here? And I would say one of the most important underlying features in an emerging leadership competency, this has kind of always been on the list, but I feel like it's rising to the top, is empathy. And it really is, like I mentioned, but at the opening, every person's situation is different. And, you know, for me, the virtually working it from home is working pretty well. I'm getting to spend some more time with my family. I don't have little kids that are jumping on my lap, and it's really working well. But the biggest mistake I could make is just to kind of impose that, hey, this works just fine on each one of my team members, you know. And I could go through and talk about each one of my team members having a completely different experience with this. So that empathy and listening, walking a mile, that empathy, right? That's walking a mile in somebody else's shoes, right? Is understanding that they could be struggling with this in ways that I didn't even comprehend. So I think a huge skill for leaders now and you know, well into the future, is empathy, just actively listening and understanding what's going on with folks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it was interesting because the assistant that supports my position, she started in February. So we were together on site for about a month, and then we transitioned into remote working. So it's been an interesting process to transition her into the overall team. And just as my right hand, transitioning into that support role, I mean, it's worked really well for us, but I think the reason that it has worked well is because of me demonstrating empathy with her, but also just being vulnerable and, you know, asking questions and checking in with how she's doing, and not putting on a facade that every day is an okay day for me, because it's not an okay day every day. And I think that's really made our partnership stronger, but also as a team, the team that we work with and that I lead and support, that's also made a lot of impact, just having those vulnerable moments with each other.
That's huge, Amy. I'm glad you brought that up, because it can be, you know, certainly in the ambiguity and not knowing what, you know, tomorrow or the next day will bring. You know, there can be kind of a driver as a manager or leader to put on that that brave face and say, hey, this is working fine. Tomorrow's going to be better. All is well. You can actually add stress to people with that they feel like, wow, everybody else is doing just fine and I'm struggling. So I think, being transparent, being honest about your own challenges, I think can be really helpful and bring a little peace to staff members too. I think that's really important, Amy. Removing roadblocks, and I'll go back to some of the technology things, but beyond that, again, this can be challenging for a lot of people. But if some of those basic needs aren't met, which is now, a computer and a network connection, and internet access, and familiarity with the tool, and access to the right tools and equipment to do your job, it's really important in any possible way that you can help remove roadblocks. Again, it's a challenging enough situation if people feel like there are roadblocks that didn't exist before. It's just that much harder to make a transition into making this a little bit more normal. So again, for my team, we've had some internet challenges, access or internet speed challenges. We've had just comfort with technology. That's another roadblock, right? And trying to get them some coaching and help to remove those frustrations. So anything you can do, if people are still trying to find a way to do their job at home, and there are roadblocks, that things that they find frustrating and getting in their way, anything you can do to help alleviate some of those challenges is really beneficial now. It also shows some empathy as well to understand that they may need something that they didn't need before.
Yeah. And really, sometimes the simplest question is asking your staff what they need to be successful in general, but during the transition to remote work or continuing with the virtual environment. And that's what I use, and that's what I coach leaders on, that I support, is making sure that they're asking staff what they need to be successful. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that you honor all of those requests, but at least it gives you some insight into their perspective and what their thoughts are. And then it makes it a little bit easier for you to create a path to remove some of those roadblocks, because it may be something that traditionally your environment is kind of like an 8 to 5 environment. And maybe you need to rethink scheduling where somebody can take a break, 3 hours or 4 hours in the middle of the day to assist with school. And they can kind of front load and back load their schedule. Those are some easy fixes that we've been able to do at the laboratory. And that's been really helpful for folks.
Yeah, another great point. Again, I think there's a lot of manager judgment in this, because it's, again, demonstrating empathy and understanding, being as flexible as possible, and knowing what that right level of flexibility is, right? So helping people be successful. Yeah. And again, depending on the environment, right, you only have, as a manager or a leader in your organization, you only have, so much flexibility that you can hand out as well. So it takes a lot of judgment there, and a team effort in terms of, talking to peers or your leadership or your HR department. What flexibility do I have? How much, flex can I put in a person's schedule, for example? That's not an easy one. Another really key one is nurturing connections. Again, I'm sure you've all read and heard about that. Missing the engagement, the day-to-day engagement that comes from working on site with other people. So how do you replace that? And we are still absolutely, without question, learning about that, right? So you say, well, we need to have more Zoom meetings, but that causes some stress too. So what are some ways that you can nurture connections in this virtual environment? We have found, and we're getting some pretty good stories now too. It's actually feeling pretty good about what we do, that in some cases, we'll do an hour or a 90-minute, professional development class during the course of the day. And we still want to focus on content, as important content or people learning, but we find when we break out people in small groups, they're just loving the interaction. And in fact, we've done a couple of those. We'll ask people, here's 3 things I want you to do in your small group, and come back and report out. And many times now they're coming back they didn't follow any of the instructions about what they were supposed to do, but they just really enjoyed the opportunity to have authentic conversations in a small group with other people.
Are you
So
calling me out, Dale? Because I think I do that in our
yeah,
breakout sessions. I think he's calling me out a little bit.
yeah, you've done that once or twice. but again, and that's okay. That's absolutely a win, and that's just one more way that we actually kind of almost discovered by accident that's another opportunity to create those nurturing connections. Again, finding ways where your team can, and you might have to be just a little bit more overt about that. People won't necessarily jump out and find their own ways to do that. But, even with on your team, is your team interacting one-on-one with each other, outside of basic meetings, or are they, having opportunities to interact with other people in your organization? So again, we don't have the answer to that, but that's something we're constantly looking at. How can we help replace some of the lost connections people had in the organization?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the feedback that I'm hearing from staff, because I try to make sure that I'm the leaders that I support, that I'm giving them feedback during this transition process for us at the lab. And really the most positive feedback that I'm receiving from staff is that even when their manager reaches out for a quick call for 5 minutes just to check in and say, how are you doing? Not necessarily what are you working on, but how are you doing? And it may be a little awkward at first if that's not something that's your norm or that naturally occurs in your normal environment. But really, your staff, they're paying attention to that. That's resonating with them. So even just putting reminders on your calendar to send a quick email or make a quick phone call with the members of your team can be something that's a little bit of a time investment, but can have great reward down the road. Another thing that we've done at the lab, which I've really enjoyed, is we have a series where every week we have either a senior leader or one of our directorates talk about what they're working on, or give some type of presentation about what's going on. And so with the organization our size, that's been an amazing opportunity to learn what's going on around the lab. But I think you could do that at any size of an organization. Of maybe if you don't have large departments or divisions, maybe it's just focusing on what a particular person does, where they can kind of highlight what a day in the life of their position looks like, or something like that. That's been a really good way for people to connect, and it gives us a different level of awareness of what's going on in our organization, not only from goals and deliverable perspective, but from a people perspective.
Great. Yeah, lots of opportunities, and those are other things too. Again, I think we did some of that in the past, but we do it much more now, and we do it on more of a regular basis. And that's one of those things when it's knowing what to hold. That's one of those things that we may learn out of this that we'll continue to do otherwise too, because again, that's a great opportunity. And finally, the one here that I think is another important one, and you've probably read or heard something about this too, is a lot of people are working from home, and helping people manage that workload, I think, is extremely important. Again, there's some techniques. Again, if you do some research out there, setting boundaries. The key ones that I think were important for me is that we lost the commute, and the commute were, in many cases, good riddance, right? Who likes the commute? But what we did have with a commute is that made a start time and an end time to our workday in general. And, the drive on the way to work kind of gets your head around, okay, what am I going to do today? Get you focused in that direction. And the commute at home gave you that, decompressed time. Okay, I'm transitioning from, work me to parent me or friend me or whatever, but home me. And we've lost those two moments. And I'm finding some people are much better at that than others, kind of instinctively, especially if somebody's working on their kitchen table, with a laptop open. That's definitely a challenge, that work can go all day and all night, and just stop by for a second and check your email and see what's going on. So I think help, being very specific and talking to your team members about, what does the work day look like, right? When will you stop? When will you end? And if you have the kind of flexibility that Amy was talking about, where, it's a little less about the 9 to, you said 8 to 5, that's a pretty long day. Maybe it's 9 to 5.
That seems like a short day to me right now.
But maybe a little bit more focus, and there's discussion of this over the course of the years too, that the workday is a little less about 9 to 5 and more about what did we agree on that you would produce during that period of time. So again, when you get that done during the course of the day or the week is less important than we, manager and the staff, discuss, this is what could get done today. This could be, what gets done during the course of the week, and a little bit less, tied to the clock. But again, we are finding a lot of people that are putting way too many hours in that it will be hard to sustain over the long term. So being very conscious about talking to them about what their day looks like, and what kind of flexibility, and like that key one, managing boundaries, right? When's the end of the day? When does the laptop get closed and you can engage in the regular life stuff beyond work? So that's an extremely important one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and even having those conversations with your team. I know we did that as with just our HR manager team, to talk about what does our new routine look like, when you talked about the commute. So for most of us, we went into a mode because, there's a lot of chaos over the the last many months. And so most of us went into modes of like, okay, well, we're working 10, 11 or 12-hour days, and it became exhausting very quickly. But for me, I started, instead of my commute, being at home where you have a spouse working at home, your kids are at home. Like, I realized how much I enjoyed going into the office. So for me, I started just taking a quick walk in the morning. Like, that was my commute. And when I don't take that, it really kind of throws my day off. And for instance, I didn't do that today. I started on Zoom calls at 7 o'clock this morning, and I'm kind of ready for a break now. But and so I realized that starting that new routine has really actually impacted me. I'm more productive, and I definitely am in a better headspace when I have a little bit of time just to go out and take a walk around the block. So I'm happy we can breathe and do that now.
Walks are an option now. Yeah, those are great points. And it really, again, it's different for every person, but I'll just restate that: setting boundaries of, when is it work and when is it home, and helping people do that. Because again, we're just finding people are working more. There was always a concern, in the years preceding, that if people worked from home, they wouldn't work as hard. That's not been our experience. It's been quite the opposite. So really important to, once again, another reason to check on, individual staff members and see how they're doing. All right, so that's been about a little over a half an hour, I guess, and I'd kind of like it to open it up. If there's any questions, be happy to take a shot at those. Logan?
I have been keeping an eye on the Q&A. We haven't received any, so if anyone viewing has any questions, feel free to throw them our way. But as of right now, there's none in there. Let's see. All right, well, it looks like you guys are in the clear.
Unless Logan has questions for us.
I just want to say thank you to both of you for the time that you spent today and your time planning this. So you covered a lot of really important information that I think is really applicable to a lot of people right now. So thank you for taking the time to share it with everyone. I want to say thank you to STCU for their continued partnership with Ask the Experts. And again, thank you for everyone viewing this. This will be on our Facebook page. So if you want to go back and recap it, feel free to do that in the next couple of minutes or at your own leisure. But with that, thank you again, Dale, sorry, Dale, and everyone. I hope you have a great rest of your day.
All right, thanks.
Great,
Logan.
thank
Thanks,
you.